25 Cromwell Street, Gloucester, England. To their neighbours, Fred and Rose West were a fairly ordinary couple. Their three-storey semi-detached house was usually lively with the sounds of children and teenage lodgers. But all was not as it seemed. On the 24th of February 1994, the police arrived at 25 Cromwell Street with a warrant allowing them to dig up the rear garden. Rose became hysterical. She urged her son Stephen to get Fred, who was at the time in a house in Stroud treating timbers in the roof. The police were searching for their daughter Heather, who had not been seen since June 1987. At 7:55 p.m, Rose West was interviewed by the police in her home. She told them she didn't know where Heather had gone. However, in an interview 2 years prior, she told the police she had given Heather £600 to help her start a new life, and when reminded of this became angry, declaring that she and Heather had never really been on good terms. The police left after only finding a chicken bone and returned the next morning with Detective Constable Hazel Savage. She had been investigating the West since 1992, looking for evidence of child abuse. Savage informed Fred that he was under arrest for murdering his daughter Heather. As he left the house, he was greeted by a crowd of reporters. "I didn't kill my daughter," he shouted. However, when in the police car, he turned to Savage and admitted he had in fact murdered Heather and buried her in the garden. He informed her that he had not intended to kill her, but Heather was sneering at him, so he decided to take that smirk off her face and strangled her. Rose was also later arrested. Before meeting Rose, Fred West married Catherine Costello, nicknamed Rena, a teenager from Scotland. Rena had her own daughter, Charmaine, and in July 1964 gave birth to Fred's daughter, Anne-Marie. They moved to a confined caravan 12 miles from Gloucester. There, Fred physically and sexually abused Charmaine. In 1966, Rena decided to leave Fred and moved back to Glasgow. Fred West then fell in love with Anne McFall, and in 1966 Anne fell pregnant with her first child. Anne later vanished. West claimed that she had returned to Glasgow. Anne's remains and the skeleton of her unborn child were later found in a field near the caravan. West later moved back in with Rena. However, their relationship deteriorated and her remains were found in April 1994 in a field near to where Anne McFall had been buried. When her remains were examined, a piece of tube was found suggesting that she had been gagged, which indicated that, like some of his other victims, she had been sexually assaulted, perhaps to West's own satisfaction. In 1969, Fred West met a girl named Rose Mary Letts, who was 15 years old. West was 27 at the time, and despite this, a year later, Rose went to live in West's caravan. Then, on the 17th of October 1970, Rose gave birth to Heather, their first child together. By this time, they had moved into 25 Midland Road, Gloucester. In November 1970, Fred West was imprisoned for car theft, and Rose was left to look after Heather, Anne and Charmaine. However, Charmaine and Rose did not get on, and in 1971 Charmaine vanished. Rose claimed that she had left to visit her father. However, in 1994 her body was found. It is believed that Rose killed her. However, Fred took the blame to protect her. Fred West sexually abused his children, even drilling holes in the walls so he could watch them undress. Anne-Marie ran away from Cromwell Street at just 15 years old and was tracked down by Hazel Savage, who was convinced that the Wests had killed Heather. She needed proof and received it from Anne, who admitted that Fred and Rose abused her and would tell her that if she didn't behave she'd end up under the patio. However, she withdrew a statement out of fear that harm would come to either of her two children if she didn't. Savage didn't give up. She convinced her superiors to dig up the garden, convinced that what Anne had told her was a fatal clue. Within just days of searching, Heather West, Alison Chambers and Shirley Cromwell were all found under the patio at 25 Cromwell Street. The search then moved to the inside of the house. Teresa Siegenthaler, Shirley Hubbard, Lucy Parlington, Juanita Mott and Caroline Cooper were all found buried in the basement, along with Linda Goth, under the bathroom floor. The police later discovered the bones of Rena West in Finger Post Field. Tragically, 12 victims in total were discovered. Shirley Robinson was 18 when she was a lodger in the West's home. She worked as a prostitute and became pregnant with Fred West's child. It is believed that Shirley was killed because Rose was jealous of her close relationship with her husband. Alison Chambers was placed in care after her parents split up. She visited the Wests often. However, on the 5th of August she vanished from the house. In September 1979, Alison's mother received a letter which said she was living with a real nice family. Alison, at just 16, was never heard of again. Linda Goff, 19, was a frequent lodger at 25 Cromwell Street. She helped out with babysitting and even had affairs with several other lodgers. In April 1973, she informed her parents that she was moving into a flat in the city, but was never seen again. Lucy Parrington, a student at Exeter University, was on her way home after seeing a friend in Cheltenham on Boxing Day. At just 19, Lucy was a quiet girl who planned on studying a postgraduate degree in an institute in London. However, after intending to catch the 10:15 bus home, she was never seen again. Caroline Cooper, 15, lived in care at the Pines Children's Home in Worcestershire. It is believed that Fred and Rose picked up Carol as she was returning to the care home on her way home from the cinema on the 10th of November 1973. Regan Siegenthal, at 21, was a student at Woolwich College in London, originally from Switzerland. She set out to hitchhike to Ireland to visit a friend. However, even though skilled at judo, she was kidnapped by the Wests on her way and never seen again. Shirley Hubbard, 15, was on work experience at Worcestershire. She dated a local boy and planned to meet with him. However, she never showed up. Juanette Mott, 17, had moved into 25 Cromwell Street as a lodger. However, only stayed there shortly after moving out, and she moved in with friends of her mother's. On the 12th of April 1975, Juanetta was supposed to babysit for a group of children, but didn't show up. On the 30th of June 1994, the nightmare finally came to an end. Fred and Rose West were jointly charged with 9 murders. Rose refused to look at Fred and continued to insist that she was completely innocent. At 11:30 on New Year's Day 1995, Fred West used the needle and thread he had been given for his job of sewing buttons on prison shirts and hung himself from a bar on the ventilation shaft above the cell door. After several other hearings, Rose West was found guilty of killing 10 of the 12 girls and was sentenced to life imprisonment. Rose later appealed against her conviction, but it was refused. The 4 youngest West children have been given new names to protect them from the notoriety of their family. Stephen, now a builder, married and had twins with his wife. However, they are now divorced. He has admitted to having a violent streak. May, who now goes by a different name, continues to visit her mother Rose in prison. The house at 25 Cromwell Street has now been torn down, with every brick being destroyed. Anne-Marie had her book Out of the Shadows published. In it she tells of the abuse she suffered at the hands of her father and stepmother, Fred and Rose West.